Thank you for coming to my talk tonight. Together is Better, Community Green Energy Generation in Alberta. Oh, there we go. So as mentioned, my name is Jodi Conuel and I am the Shift Program Coordinator at the Biosphere Institute of the Bow Valley. In this role, I work to empower Bow Valley residents to take action on climate change. I'm also a founding board member and officer of the Valley Green Energy Cooperative, a locally owned social enterprise that is working to facilitate renewable energy installations right here in the Bow Valley. So just a brief overview of our agenda this evening. I'm going to be giving a presentation which will follow this general outline, but there'll be plenty of room for conversation at the end, as Andrew mentioned. I do have some audience participation questions scattered throughout just to break it up a little, and I hope that we can all leave here a little more knowledgeable on a particular type of community action. So let's kick things off with one of those audience participation questions right off the bat. You may have an idea that we're going to be talking about renewable energy here tonight. So answer me this. Does Southern Alberta have some of the highest solar potential in Canada? Yes or no? What are we thinking? Just shout out. Yes, 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 yes. Awesome. Perfect answer. Thank you. The answer is yes. Southern Alberta gets a lot of sunshine throughout the year, meaning it has some of the highest solar energy potential in any place in Canada. Calgary, for example, ranks the second highest in all the major Canadian cities for photovoltaic potential. We receive approximately 50% more solar energy than Germany, a country that has been leading the charge in solar installations. Conuel itself holds tremendous potential for generating electricity from solar, despite the shading that happens from the mountains. It turns out that the roof design and geometry have 4.3 times more impact on solar potential than the physical location of the buildings within the valley. So you can be on the shady side or the sunny side, and solar still makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to a quick overview of the fundamental reason we're all here tonight, the problem our community action is trying to solve, the problem of climate change. Today's scientists are able to access and evaluate ancient air bubbles trapped in ice, which enables us to step back in time and see what Earth's atmosphere and climate were like in the distant past. These air bubbles analyses tell us that the levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are higher today than they have been at any time in the past 400,000 years. In 2013, the carbon dioxide levels surpassed 400 parts per million for the first time in recorded history. These high levels of carbon dioxide are adding extra insulation to the Earth's atmosphere, and as such, the planet's average surface temperature is increasing and has risen by 2 degrees Fahrenheit or 1 degree Celsius since the late 19th century. A change driven largely by increased carbon dioxide emissions going into the atmosphere and from human activities. Most of the warming has occurred in the past 40 years, with the 7 most recent years being the warmest. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, often referred to as the IPCC, the influence of human activity on the warming of the climate system has evolved from theory to established fact. So we know that the Earth is heating up. Let's talk about why that's a problem. A change in global temperature impacts the climate systems of our planet, which has a knock-on effect to our local weather and the predictability of our seasons. And mountains are amongst the most sensitive ecosystem to climate change and are being affected at a faster rate than any other terrestrial habitat. On a local level, climate change is increasing the frequency and severity of wildfires. 2023 is the worst year for wildfires in Alberta and across Canada, with the largest areas ever recorded burned. And the smoke in the air yesterday told me that the fire season is not quite done yet. Climate change is melting our glaciers. Lower elevation glaciers, such as the Peyto Glacier, are projected to disappear in the next 30 to 40 years. And changes in temperature and increased winter precipitation falling as rain instead of snow is going to impact snowpack, which affects our local ski-based industries and puts backcountry adventurers at greater risk of avalanches. And unfortunately, humans are not the only ones who are going to be impacted. A changing climate is also bad news for our alpine ecosystems and the plants and animals that live within it. But we're not here to focus on the problem. I'm here to talk about the solutions. And it's important to recognize that solutions to the problem of climate change already exist. And we can all take really simple, effective climate action. We can choose low carbon transportation. We can make our buildings more energy efficient. We can power our lives with renewable energy. We can conserve water, and we can aim for zero waste. However, some of these things are harder to do than others. A feasibility study into renewable energy generation facilitated by the Biosphere Institute in 2019 identified 3 major barriers to participation in the renewable energy transition. Firstly, many households rent, or people live in condominiums, and they have to make choices with other people who don't necessarily agree. Secondly, some buildings just don't support the infrastructure. If your roof points north, then solar's not going to work for you. And finally, the obvious one, some homeowners just can't afford the initial capital investment. Renewable energy is not that cheap. And you may also be thinking about another potential barrier that's specific to our mountain environment. Snow on solar panels. So what do you think? Does snow significantly affect overall solar production? Oh, we've got a no and a yes. Oh, give this guy a medal. Okay. So the answer is surprisingly no. With the right angle of installation, snow only reduces any energy production of solar panels by 1 to 5%. So you're absolutely right. Having snow on your panels does impact the solar production on any one given day. However, researchers have found out that the angle at which the solar panel is mounted has a far greater impact on the production than snow coverage. And part of the reason that snow has a reasonably small effect on the overall production of the solar panels across the course of a year is because most of the solar generation happens in the summer when your panels are not covered in snow. So between March and October, when you're making the most energy, you're not using, your panels are not covered in snow. Therefore, when the snow does fall and your energy production is lower anyway, the incremental decrease in snow on panels over the course of a year is relatively small. So we've identified a few barriers to the renewable energy transition, and no, snow isn't necessarily one of them. But how do we overcome the issue of access, poor design, and upfront costs? Well, this is where the concept of community generation comes in. So what is it? What's community generation? To appreciate this, we need to know that there are different ways of connecting a renewable energy system into the electricity grid and different regulations that go along with these interconnection types. One of these scenarios is called distribution connected or small scale generation. In this situation, a renewable energy project is connected directly into the grid. And in small scale projects like these, 100% of the energy is sent directly to the grid. There's no off-taker or specific end user for the energy generated. These initiatives are generally financed by a group of businesses who receive all the profit in return for financially backing the project. Think of a traditional solar farm or a big wind farm. Projects of this type become economically viable around the 1 megawatt size due to high interconnection fees and the need for expensive pre-construction studies. Projects of this scale usually cost in the region of $1 million, just to give you some idea about how big these things are. These types of projects are governed under the small scale generation regulation. This is a provincial regulation that is intended to enable electricity generation from alternative sources to supply electricity directly to the grid. And it's meant to help reduce regulatory barriers for commercial power generators. Community generation, in its purest definition, refers to renewable energy that is distribution connected and provides economic benefits to communities. To qualify as a community generating unit and to be able to benefit from this particular piece of regulation, projects must demonstrate a social, economic, or environmental benefit to the community, such as providing training and development opportunities, contributing to a community endowment fund, or developing community infrastructure with the profits of the development. Now, community generation is great because it allows citizens, regardless of their housing or economic situation, to directly participate in energy projects through the full or partial ownership of an enterprise. In doing these types of projects, it keeps the economic benefits within local communities, encourages local job creation, provides local environmental benefits, and often supports community-focused social initiatives with their profits. So all good things. And community generation is happening right here in the Bow Valley. Now, the regulations that facilitate community generation that we just discussed were first brought into force in January of 2019. When this regulation was first brought out, the Municipal Climate Change Action Centre and the now defunct Energy Efficiency Alberta wanted to facilitate the development of these community generation projects, specifically in Alberta. So they created a fund called the Community Generation Capacity Building Program, a program that the Biosphere Institute successfully applied to. We promptly undertook a feasibility study investigating options to develop a community-owned energy generation project in or maybe near to Canmore. The Biosphere called the project Canmore Community Solar, and we envisioned using community financing to install a network of solar panels energy. The Biosphere identified and assessed local, residential, commercial, and industrial rooftops that would be potentially suitable for solar panel installations. We worked to estimate the number of panels possible on each property, how much electricity could be generated, what it might cost, and how the panels would potentially connect to Alberta's electricity grid. And at the same time, we reached out to property owners to understand their interest in participating in a project where they would be renting out their rooftop. And finally, we began working with the Alberta Community and Cooperatives Association to understand how to create a successful local renewable energy cooperative to finance and manage any initiative which may evolve from this project. So what did we find out? Well, firstly, as we've discussed, there are barriers to participating in the renewable energy transition. But despite that, many households, condominiums, businesses noted a big interest in renting out their rooftop to a potential community-funded installation. So many, in fact, that we got to a list of 150 people and we had to just draw a line and start creating a wait list because we ran out of capacity to work with all of those individual buildings. However, once we started digging into the regulations a little bit more, we realized that renting a rooftop, filling it with solar, and connecting the system directly to the grid under the small-scale generation regulations would require each individual rooftop to have its own interconnection point. Costs of direct interconnection to the grid would run into the thousands per property, and it just puts the economics of a potential project out of the window. So you're looking at these 1 megawatt scale projects as being the most viable. And this was also the case for these larger projects. It's still difficult to fit a megawatt of solar onto even an industrial sized rooftop. Aggregating systems was another opportunity we investigated. but this was also difficult and expensive, requires running lots of cable between buildings and additional electrical infrastructure. So in conclusion,
a megawatt, how much the square footage of a megawatt, and that's a megawatt?
a couple of acres.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a megawatt size of system, which is how many panels are installed, and there's megawatt hours, which is how much energy it's actually producing over a period of time. Yeah. So there's slightly different measurements, but they usually come out about the same. Pretty much. Yeah. It's changing all the time as panels become more efficient. But yeah, thank you for bringing me out of the definition space. For context, an average household has a solar system that's about 7 kilowatts, and 1 megawatt is 1,000 kilowatts. Jeff, that's right? Yeah, thank you. So yeah, so much bigger than a traditional rooftop. Andrew, did you have a follow-up question? Okay. Jeff?
125 kilowatts. And 10 more, 125 kilowatts will give you about 125,000 kilowatt hours. Or 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt of installation.
Yeah. Yeah, a megawatt is huge. Think massive solar farm, think $1 million, think way too big for a small group of volunteers to facilitate and pull together. So in conclusion, it's much more expensive to install a megawatt of solar on existing built space than it is to install a megawatt of solar farm in a field somewhere. It's way more expensive. It takes too much effort. Doesn't work from a feasibility perspective, particularly under the current legislation and interconnection rules. So during this process, the Biosphere joined with interested community members to form a small steering committee. And despite the difficulties identified in the feasibility study, these guys were not to be deterred. This group of people continue to meet weekly and put their ranging skill set to great use. And they came up with a solution to get past that problem of interconnectivity costing so much money and the need to operate in that megawatt space to make any kind of project financially feasible. And I'm just going to take this opportunity to point out Jeff Roberts over here, who is actually the chair of Valley Green Energy, and he's one of our founding board members, and he's one of the key brains behind this whole project. So feel free to ask any and all questions later because he's here to answer, if I can't. There we go. So let me just check I didn't skip a slide there. Yeah, there we go. So the steering team that Jeff was part of worked out a way to install community-owned energy systems behind the meter. So under a different set of regulations called the microgeneration regulations. Now, microgeneration is what you think of when you see solar panels on a rooftop around town. It's probably what your solar panels are connected under. It's what mine are connected under for sure. So the panels generate electricity, which flows into the building. And the power is used within the property first. And any power that's excess to the needs of the property is exported to the grid through a bidirectional meter. And because these projects are considered behind the meter, there is always a specified end user for the generated energy. Whereas with the small scale regulation, we were pumping energy directly into the grid and there's nobody specifically taking that power away. That's the key difference here. So once this amazing team of volunteers figured out this kind of workaround that we could operate under a different set of energy regulations, the next step was to build an investment-ready organization. And in 2020, with additional support from the Biosphere Institute, this steering committee created, legally incorporated, and officially launched the Valley Green Energy Cooperative, who are a community-owned social enterprise who have a vision to make renewable energy affordable and accessible here in the Bow Valley. Their mission is to empower community to reduce its environmental impact by pooling human and financial resources and fostering the development of these renewable energy projects. And they're also working to lead our community on the renewable energy transition. So as a locally owned developer of renewable energy, it was really important to Valley Green Energy to remove any financial barriers to people wanting to participate in their work. And they designed their organization with affordability and accessibility at the forefront of their business model. Now, as we know, community generation in its defined form is currently enabled under those pesky small-scale generation regulations, which allows people, energy generators, to sell their energy directly to the grid. These projects, we know, cost upwards of $1 million, which makes them unaffordable for most community organizations, particularly as an inaugural project for a fledgling organization. And to circumvent this barrier, Valley Green Energy created their unique business model to operate under the microgeneration regulations. While this does mean that they are not strictly community generators as defined under the regulations, which is why it's really important that we talk about the regulations so that there's no confusion, we do consider ourselves to be a community generator because we are using community funds to install renewable energy, and we're directing the profits back into community-focused opportunities. So thanks to this innovative business model, Valley Green Energy became the first renewable energy cooperative to install community-owned solar panels in Alberta. Thanks to the outreach work of the Biosphere, conversations with potential host sites had been ongoing during Valley Green Energy's incorporation. And with the concept of a pilot project in mind, one potential host site just really stood out. And that was the Ralph Connor Memorial United Church. For those that don't know, it's just located on the main street in Canmore here. So after several long months of meetings, negotiations, and the long suffering of COVID-induced supply chain delays, because all of this was happening during COVID, Valley Green Energy was extremely excited to flip the switch and electrify its first solar installation in early September of 2021 at the church. Just yesterday, it celebrated its 2-year anniversary. Since then, this installation has generated over 22 megawatt hours of power and offset over 16 tons of carbon dioxide. That is the equivalent of planting 258 trees, and those numbers are just increasing every day that we get a little bit of sunshine. So how does this concept of community generation work under the microgeneration regulation? So at a sky-high level, there are 4 really easy steps. First of all, Valley Green Energy identifies a potential host site. They undertake initial surveys and negotiate a power purchase agreement with the host. Once a suitable host site has been identified, Valley Green Energy then reaches out into the community to attract local investment and uses that investment to purchase, install, and electrify a renewable energy system on a particular host property. Once the system is operating, Valley Green Energy collects money from the host in exchange for 100% of the renewable energy that was generated, and then the income is divided. So a portion goes into the social benefit fund to be reinvested into other community-based projects. Some goes to provide dividends to investors in the projects. And obviously, we need to make sure our base costs are covered so we can continue operating and doing what we do best. Working with Ralph Connor Memorial United Church allowed Valley Green Energy to really understand what motivates potential host sites and to identify early on which sites show the highest potential for a successful agreement. Successful host sites usually fall into at least one of these following situations. They're sites that can't afford the upfront cost of renewable energy. They tend to be socially minded organizations and have a vested interest in supporting Valley Green's community initiatives. Or they're sites that offer the potential to expand other areas of the co-op. So they know lots of potential hosts, they have lots of outreach into the community and can help us develop our own membership and investment portfolios. They usually provide a benefit that's additional to the co-op beyond just hosting a system. But the priority is that they have to want to work with us. That's really important because we're trying to facilitate the renewable energy transition and we want to work with other people that live in that space as well. Now, one of the questions Valley Green Energy gets a lot from potential host sites is what happens to the solar panels after they reach their end of life? So I'm interested to know, we have a little poll here. What do you think the percentage materials available for reuse in the production of new solar panels is from old solar panels? Jeff, you're not allowed to answer. Anyone care to guess?
I'll say D, just to
B, 54%?
Hoping for A, but we're gonna have my doubts.
So we got a pretty firm 54% in the room. I can confirm that the answer really might surprise you. It's 96%. 96% of the materials in solar panels can be made available for reuse in the production of new solar panels, which I think is pretty awesome when it comes to recycling. Now, remembering that on average, solar panels have an expected lifespan of 25 to 30 years, but they do operate much longer than that. With proper waste management planning today, e-waste associated with decommissioned solar panels has plenty of time to be turned into opportunities to create value and new economic avenues coming out of this influx of solar that we're seeing today. And initial groundwork and planning for recycling in Alberta has already begun. The Recycling Council of Alberta is actively working on this potential problem and seeking solutions, which I think is great.
solar panels being decommissioned, what would be the percentage of panels currently being recycled? Or is that 96 a possibility?
So my understanding is right now is they're being stockpiled whilst these potential avenues for recycling are being developed. Jeff, you have a good idea?
Yeah, so we can follow what California is doing. California, when they were early adopters of solar, when when new generations of panels came out with much higher efficiency, the panels that were taken off had very little value. A lot of people grabbed those, and they're willing to put the panels on the roofs with the low efficiency at an extremely low cost. So many of the panels are being reused, repurposed in different settings. People put them on their garages, their sheds, that sort of thing.
Thanks, Jeff. So while we're on the topic of host sites, I'm sure everyone here recognizes that there is a potentially untapped resource when it comes to condominium developments in our town and all across Alberta. As larger sized buildings, one might think they are the perfect location for a community energy project. And Valley Green Energy certainly thought so as well. However, condominiums are kind of tricky, and let me explain why. So under the micro generation regulations, a building is restricted to the amount of solar that can be installed. The panels are only allowed to offset up to 100% of a building's usage over the course of 1 year. So this is easy when you install solar panels on an individual family home where there's only one electricity meter. However, most condos are built with individual meters on each particular residence and then another meter monitoring the energy use on any communal areas. Under the regulations, there can only be one interconnection point between the solar panels and the electrical meters. So usually in condominiums, they attach the solar panels to the common area meter because it's fair, right? Otherwise, only one person's getting the solar energy. But if energy draw on that particular area is low, so for example, you just have some LED lights and a few components in a mechanical room that you're powering, there really is only a small capacity to install solar on that particular building. And the economies of scale do not work in your favor. Again, thanks to the regulations that we're having to work within. Having said that, there are two scenarios where solar on condominiums makes sense from a regulatory perspective. One of these is if you have a high energy use in your common areas, so you might have a swimming pool or a sauna that you need to power, or if you do what we did here, which is work with a condominium from the design stage. So for the second project and installation at the new iPlace multi-use development, which is over by the high school, hopefully some of you guys have driven past it. It's the project we were just talking about, 127 kilowatts in size. Valley Green Energy worked directly with the electricians and the developer to design the electrical system to support the installation of solar and maximize its benefits from the very beginning. So building onto new developments works, building onto condominiums that have a high energy use works, but retrofitting a lot of condominiums is going to be potentially quite tricky piece of the energy transition that as a community we're going to have to overcome. And just a little brag here, Valley Green Energy didn't stop there. In June of 2023, and in partnership with BVGEC and KCP Energy, Valley Green Energy installed and electrified their third system, a 291 kilowatt system, on the rooftop of one of the process buildings at BVGEC's operations near Exshaw. This opens the door for industrial sites as potential hosts for this particular organization. We're very proud of this one, as you can see. It's our biggest installation to date, and it's got some big potential offsets when it comes to carbon and energy generation. So to date, the community, because we are a community of our members of Valley Green Energy, is the proud owner of 429 kilowatts of installed solar panels, which is almost half a megawatt, which have produced over 320 megawatt hours of renewable energy and offset 266 tons of carbon dioxide. And fun fact, these numbers are already out of date because I did them yesterday and we had some sunshine today. So yay for that. A testament to their success is the election of Valley Green Energy as the winner of the Co-op Innovation Award at the 2022 ACCA Cooperative Awards. And as Andrew mentioned, this year, Valley Green Energy Cooperative was privileged to win the energy category at the 2023 Emerald Awards, which recognizes excellence in environmental leadership. So up next for Valley Green Energy Cooperative is a slightly smaller 26 kilowatt system to be installed at Temple B'nai Tikva. But the great thing about this is it's Valley Green Energy's first installation in the city of Calgary. Construction is scheduled for the fall, hopefully mid to late October, with electrification sometime towards the end of October, early November. So by the end of the year, Valley Green Energy will have 4 functioning renewable energy projects, which have been all supported by community financing. So now that you know a little bit more about community generation and how it's being implemented locally, I want to take the opportunity to focus on how you can get involved and how you can champion community generation in our community and beyond. It's quite easy. I would say you can kind of start by advocating for the renewable energy transition here in Alberta. And you can really do that every single day. And the first step is to really just learn about renewable energy, learn about community generation initiatives, and talk to people about them. Coming to events like this is a really great place to start. A barrier that we identified to the uptake of renewable energy is misinformation. And Valley Green Energy and the Biosphere Institute are working collaboratively to try and combat that. if you're interested in learning a few more compelling facts about solar energy, you're welcome to check out a dedicated myth-busting page on Valley Green Energy's website. You can also find it by going through the Biosphere website. There's lots of great information on there about renewable energy and the benefits of it for you to share. In Valley Green Energy Cooperative's view, both the small scale and the micro generation regulations could be tweaked slightly to support community generation better. And organizations like Valley Green Energy and Solar Alberta are working to advocate for these small changes that could be really beneficial to these particular initiatives that we've talked about tonight. I have touched quite heavily on some of the issues we encountered as we went along on our journey, and a few tweaks to these regulations could really help us grow bigger and faster. And if you're interested, you can help us advocate for those changes. Organizations like Valley Green and Solar Alberta are more than willing to sit down and talk to you about how you can do that. I won't go into too much detail here tonight, but it might be a simple case of writing a letter or making a phone call or posting something on social media. And this really isn't all that you can do. Valley Green Energy is an entirely volunteer-run organization, and as such is always looking for new volunteers to help support their ever-increasing workload. As any cooperative is, they're always looking for new members, and right now they have multiple energy projects sitting in the back of the queue, waiting for potential investment. Alternatively, if you own a commercial property or have connections with a socially minded organization that's interested in installing solar panels, but are short on capital, they might be the perfect fit for a host site. So please get them to get in touch and we can have a conversation. And finally, if investing, membership or volunteering are not in your wheelhouse, there is one more way you can support our work, and that is by switching your household or business energy contracts to Rocky Mountain Community Energy, which is Valley Green Energy's energy trading arm. So let's wrap things up with a quick summary. The climate is changing and our planet is heating up, thanks primarily to the spike in human-caused carbon dioxide emissions. There are numerous solutions which encourage a reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, but not all of them are easy. And significant barriers to the renewable energy transition exist, including local infrastructure, regulatory restrictions, and realistically the upfront cost. But there is, however, a local community-based organization, the Valley Green Energy Cooperative, that is working to minimize barriers, and they're not the only ones. There are a couple of other renewable energy cooperatives operating within Alberta, in Edmonton, Lethbridge, Athabasca. There may even be one developing in Calgary. There's lots of groups out there that are trying to replicate what Valley Green Energy is doing, and we're doing everything that we can to support them. And I invite you also to get involved and support those organizations as well. So that's enough for me just for now. Thank you for listening tonight. I really wanted to leave a lot of space for questions because I know some of these topics are not that straightforward, and I'm really happy to answer questions and hear comments and thoughts. So I'm going to open up the floor.
Roofing materials, it makes sense that you can have a narrow roof longer typically than asphalt shingles. If you have an asphalt roof and you need to re-roofing, you'd have to take the panels off and do that. So you're probably recommending metal roof would be the way to go.
Yeah, do you have a thought?
Yeah, surprisingly, what the panels do is they actually protect the asphalt roof. So asphalt roofs degrade with the sun getting it. Yeah. Once you put the solar panels on top, you don't have that degradation because they lost they would tend to want to put still has reasonable life. Panels will actually allow it to.
Jeff, I'm going to invite you to just come up here so that people on the line can hear you as well. No, you can come here. So yeah, basically what Jeff said was, if you're thinking about getting a new roof, and whether you go asphalt or metal is entirely up to you, but we would recommend getting the new roof first, but also talking to your roofing contractor and telling them, I'm interested in getting solar panels, because you may be able to reduce costs by having the racking for the solar panels installed at the same time as your new roof. So you don't have to have two different sets of contractors coming in separately. You might be able to facilitate it all happening at once. So there could be some cost savings there. But with regards to, as you say, metal versus asphalt, I think it's almost a personal choice.
Metal's actually really easy because they have on these standing seams that you see on the metal roofs, they have clips that you screw those on, and then your racking fits on top of those. So there's no actual penetration into the roof. Many folks are nervous about penetrating their roof, but there's a number of different types of fasteners that go through the roof into your roof joists, and there's a polymer that goes with it that self seals over top of that. One of the prospects that we have here is a cedar roof, and we're working on how to do that without significant liability on the cedar roof.
I will say that I have solar panels on my own home on an asphalt roof, and I've not had any issues with leaking, and they're approximately 2 years old at this point. So that makes everyone feel better. Any other questions, conversations, comments?
So if you don't have the ideal roof, which we don't seem to have, we live on the dark side of it more, and we don't have a big exposure to the southern side. So we had KCP assess our roof, and we had to put about 10 panels on different places. It would probably not look great, and we would get actually 77 kilowatt hours. But what would you recommend? Roof is still relatively new, but now there are also solutions coming up where you can actually have these glass tiles like Tesla roofs, right? Are these coming now, or what would you recommend for basically helping these kind of situations? Because we would like to put solar panels on our roof, but it's really cost prohibitive and wouldn't look great right now with it.
Yeah, so what I would say is that the technologies is changing and advancing so fast, it's really tough to keep a handle on it. I'd keep looking, and I'd wait until there's really good examples that are out there, and there's solar shingles now, there's the wall panels, those sort of things. Just keep an eye on what the dollars per kilowatt are, and we're not in that game yet, but we are keeping our eye on it. And I do know that a condominium complex here, 4-unit condominium complex, has worked together the 4 owners have worked together to put the panels on the sunny side and the west side, and they share the output of those through 4 different inverters going to their 4 individual meters. It cost a little bit more, but they were doing it for the environmental benefits and more so than the cost, and they believe that they'll pay for themselves in pretty short order.
And I will just give a little shout out. There's a technology available from America. They do ship up to Canada, so it may cost you a little more, but it's called Solar Skin. And they can print a design onto solar panels, and I think it reduces the efficiency of the panels by about 1%. But they can basically take a picture of your roof and print it on top of the solar panels. Don't ask me how much it costs. I don't know, but I think Disney World has like a really cool example where they have a big Mickey Mouse floating on a lake, which is actually a bunch of solar panels. So that's one option as well. I've been keeping my eye on the Tesla tiles for a while, but I don't see them yet coming forward into the market heavily. So I'd be a little hesitant myself. And I suppose the other thing I would say is if you're on the dark side of the valley, I don't know if you're going to be around in June, but the Biosphere Institute runs an event every year called the Green Buildings Open House. And just this year, back in June, we had a house that does have 2 solar systems, one for its tenant and one for the main house on the dark side of the valley. So assuming that they're interested in coming back again this year, or next year, sorry, there's a good chance that they will. They were super stoked about the whole event. So maybe just make that date, mark the date in your calendar, and for the Green Buildings Open House, you can go and talk to some people who do have solar on the dark side of the valley, and they find it's very effective for them. No problem.
May have these numbers wrong, but it used to be like payback for, if you put solar on the roof, it'd be about 20 years. It depends on how it's set up, but is that time frame come down?
Oh, yeah, it's down around, in range about 14. If you were to get the federal grants that are available right now, that takes it down to 7 or 8 years. And then if you participate in Solar Club by selling your electricity back into the grid at a 30 cents a kilowatt hour, it's a special program there. That takes it down to 5 or 6.
Yeah, so my solar panels, and I've got a track on mine. I did get the federal grant. I was also lucky enough to pull the Town of Conuel lottery. So I got a total of $6,250 grant towards my solar panels, which brought the cost down to $12,000. I'm going to pay, and I'm tracking this data like every day. My solar panels are going to pay for themselves in 4 years. The solar installer told me 8, so that's without the Solar Club, but the Solar Club is what Jeff just mentioned, and we'll be happy to go offline and have a conversation about that opportunity and a little bit more in depth. But it's basically an opportunity for someone with solar panels to sell the energy that their solar panels make to the grid at a very good rate, which obviously shortens your time frame. So right now, from an economic perspective, is the best time there has ever been to install install solar from an economic perspective.
Solar Club sells that electricity and then households can purchase that.
No.
No. So Solar Club is a program that Rocky Mountain Community Energy is a part of. It's a two rate system where when you're exporting in the summertime, you move to a 30 cents a kilowatt hour rate in the summertime when you're exporting. And so the difference between your import and your export, you get 30 cents for that. In October, end of October, you switch to I think it's an 11 cent rate. So during the wintertime, when you're not producing solar, you're only paying 11 cents. And that delta between the 11 and the 30 is aggregated and sold to individuals who are looking, or corporations who are looking to buy green electricity. And we're not generally in Alberta, but they're willing to pay a higher price to say they're green.
How many megawatts does a household consume?
So
7 kilowatts is the average household system.
So my place uses 8,000 kilowatt hours, and that's for the hot tub electrically. Yep,
Yeah.
kilowatt hours, and I would need a 8 kilowatt system to offset that.
That would be how much of a megawatt?
No.
0.07?
20.
Point
No.
Come on, engineer.
Yeah.
80% of a megawatt.
No, less, much less.
A megawatt's 1,000 kilowatts.
Megawatts, 1,000 kilowatts, yeah. So you build up your megawatts over time, but you wouldn't necessarily create a megawatt in a year. I could look at my solar right now and tell you how much I produce. I'm not messing around. Just while I pull this up, does anyone have any other questions?
I'll send out an email following up next with all Jodi's slides and some of the links and websites that we mentioned. To anyone who's registered, just come and find me.
Can you just explain, as it's a like you were saying, there are rental opportunities or solar opportunities, if you don't have solar on your roof, but want to buy it. And yeah, maybe just explain how you can buy part of the solar club or buying the solar club, the Rocky Mountain Energy, offset your bill.
So you can only sign up to the solar club if you have solar panels on your own roof.
Okay.
You can sign up to Rocky Mountain Community Energy, and I don't want to push this too much, but and you can sign up to them and you can offset your energy by signing up for green power, which costs a little bit more money. But it's basically Rocky Mountain Community Energy are purchasing big blocks of renewable energy from these big solar farms, wind farms that we talked about, and then they distribute that allocation of the bill to you that is green energy. So in all honesty, there's no guarantee you're actually getting green electrons because of the way electricity works. It goes to the nearest point of offtake from the grid. So everything that's near to a solar farm is renewable powered, if you really want to get technical about it. And your house is unlikely to be, but by paying that extra little bit for topping up your power and making it green, you are financing the additional installation of renewable energy projects. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're getting into a little bit into the technical ways of the power grid and how power purchasing works on an industrial scale.
Really rates won't fluctuate with the market rate.
No, so Rocky Mountain Community Energy is a retailer for a wholesale power purchaser. So it's utility net partners. They purchase 3-year block of energy at a fixed price from a generator somewhere, and then we resell that on their behalf. So it does, as the prices change daily or monthly on a regulated rate auction, or stay flat for, we got 2 rates. We have 3 rates, right? 1 year, 3 years, and then the grid cost rate, which is the one that goes up and down, and it's been crazy during the summer.
Can you just explain our places? Is all of that going like to the condominium, to the residents, and the functioning of those businesses? And then anything additional is back to the what?
So they're not a participant in Solar Club right now,
Okay.
but is in August they produced, I think, 7 times more electricity than they actually consumed. Once you get into the winter time, they're consuming more electricity from the grid than they're actually producing. And over the course of a year, it'll be balanced. So summertime they're exporting into the grid. Wintertime they're importing.
So are they paying for it? It's just gonna equal out, like it doesn't have to be stored.
Pardon me?
They're selling it back and they're buying it back.
So they're selling into, they're receiving money for what they put into the grid, and they will be paying, or they have so they'll have a net savings, or a net savings in the summertime and a net cost in the wintertime. And over the course of the year, it will essentially be balanced. You actually make a yes.
But with regards to like the electrons are flowing through that building. So from a physics standpoint, all of the properties within the condominiums are actually receiving renewable energy. That makes sense. There's different ways we can talk about how the power flows as well.
Prices last longer as well.
Oh, I didn't. I mean, we should add that to our sales page.
Yeah. The panels on our place is it 1 meter, or is everybody who owns, or the tenants there, they have their own? Are they paying their own utilities?
Tenants are paying their own utilities. What gets balanced off is the common load for the building, the the elevator, the heating, the electric chargers that are there. They're all part of the common common load. But at the end of the day, the electrons probably never leave the property that go back into feeding the tenants. So unbeknownst to them, they're getting green electricity.
Yeah.
Without paying an extra premium for it.
Yeah.
Not the cost of electricity that kills the average person, it's all the extra charges.
Correct.
Most of our bills, the extra charges are double to triple what the actual consumption charge are.
Correct.
And I still have bills from 1973 from the same house, and there was no extra charges.
Yeah. So there's three parts to your electricity bill. There's your fixed costs, there's your variable costs, and then there's your energy cost. The energy cost is what you see when you sign up to a 6 cents per kilowatt, whatever we're paying now. It's ridiculous amounts of money. The fixed charges and the variable charges are your transmission distribution charges, and they are fixed by the people who own the lines. So it's not your power company, it's actually the people who own the lines, and then the power company adds a little bit on top to make sure that they've got a little bit of profit coming in for themselves, right? The benefit of having solar is that for every electron that you use from your solar panels, you do not pay transmission and distribution charges on. So that's where the primary saving comes when you have your own solar panels. So you have to kind of think about how you change your lifestyle a little bit to ensure that, okay, let's put my dishwasher on during the day. Let's do my washing during the day when the solar panels are running, because you're using those electrons and you're not paying the transmission and distribution charges on those particular electrons. So yes, you're absolutely right. There are fixed transmission and distribution charges that we all have to pay for the privilege of being connected to the grid. But if you have solar, there are ways to minimize them and increase the return on investment on your solar panels if you try and prioritize using those solar electrons in your home.
Charges on.
No, it's only energy that you pull in from the grid. So might be a case of upgrading appliances so they have timers on them, or buying like little timer meters so that you can plug into the wall and then plug your appliance into. It's a much cheaper way of doing it and less wasteful if you have reasonably efficient appliances. But yeah, prioritize using those solar electrons. It's a fun game we play in my house. The sun is shining. What can we turn on?
Depends on what size your hot tub is, but how much a month do you think you save by having solar? I had a cost on our hot tub probably 10 years ago, $35 a month.
I think it's a
Winter only.
Yeah. So it's so I don't have solar yet on where I'm living now. Building a place that's got solar and geothermal, but we figure it's about $20 a month that we spend on the solar. I did before and after.
But if you have a hot tub in place and a solar provider comes to do a quote on your property, they'll take the energy load of that hot tub into account. So they'll size the system based on the energy load of your property. So it will always offset the cost of your hot tub because they will design it to do that. Absolutely. Yes, but you do have to turn your lights on at night to see. So LED lights, yeah. So there is a fine balance, but the idea is that at the end of the year, your balance would be zero on your electricity bill. So right now I'm racking up a credit, and then in the winter I'm going to slowly eat away at that as I pull in energy from the grid. And with a little bit of luck and a little bit of resourcefulness on the energy savings front, I should be able to have a zero balance when it comes back time to switch the power rate again. Andrew, did you have a question?
I was wondering if you could speak to if there's a limit on your solar versus house. Like, could you comment on heat pumps and electric vehicles. Solar.
Great. I would say absolutely do it. If you have the opportunity to install solar panels and upgrade your heating system to a heat pump, so an electrical based system, basically, it makes absolute financial sense, because your system again will be sized to accommodate the energy usage from the heat pump. So in the summer, when you're not using your heat pump as much, you're building up a bigger portion of credit. Does that answer your question, Andrew? And I suppose the same with EVs as well. If you have an EV, it's all counted into the load design of your system. It becomes a little trickier when you don't have these things in place. So if you don't already have a heat pump or you don't already have an EV, even if you're already planning on buying one, there's no guarantee that the solar installer will be able to factor that into the calculations, because by law, they are regulated to only give you enough solar to cover the energy usage of your property at the time. Some solar installers may take it into account, and if you can tell them I'm buying this EV on this date and it's going to need this much power to charge it, they may be able to make the excuse that that is happening, that is real, and to build that into your solar installation. But in some instances, you may have to add on additional solar panels at a later date to accommodate the increase in energy draw by changing to a heat pump or installing an EV at a later date.
That's exactly what we're doing. So we don't have an e-vehicle. We intend to get one at some time in the future. We're making sure that the space is available on the roof for additional panels to do that, as well as the inverter size to handle the additional load coming through. And yeah, so we're making sure that's doing some pre-investment in that to make sure that that's all set up.
And not install larger than your.
No, not at this time.
Not at this time under the current regulations.
Maybe you could probably get away with up to 10-15% on a sort of every now and again. That was one of the proposals that we were taking to the Minister of Energy last year, 2 years ago, that allow that to go to 125% of your annual consumption, just as a way of offloading and letting people who are willing to pay for solar panels to give them a little bit more. That wasn't met with a whole lot of support.
Here's what they're wanting to take that by,
So it comes down to the capacity of the electrical grid. Their belief is that if everybody put on 200% of solar onto their roof, everyone on the street did that, we're going to start overloading the electrical system. We're going to start needing electrical upgrades, which are incredibly costly. So they do have relatively viable reasoning. But our thought is that, well, if it could be 15 to 20% higher, it's that additional, it lowers the return on investment time frame. It makes solar much more financially attractive to those who are kind of umming and ahhing about whether they should do it. And realistically, you're not going to overload the grid by adding an extra 10% onto a system. But those are the kind of conversations that we have to have with big companies and the government.
They can solve for that by reducing production of electricity. If there's more green coming, they can just scale that. We don't want to do that.
Yes and no. It's an incredibly valid point. However, what the power generators don't like is that they can't necessarily switch off your solar system. They can, however, switch off a megawatt of solar sitting in a farm in Lethbridge. There's on a small scale distribution connected energy generating system that's pumping energy into the grid all day, every day. There's somebody in an office in Calgary that has the ability to go turn that off. So if there's and they can do this with any power generating plant. If there's too much energy coming into the grid and it threatens to offload the system or upset the system, they can switch on and switch off energy generating units all across Alberta and probably slightly wider. And so they're scared that if everybody has solar and everybody's pumping lots of energy into the grid and they experience an incredibly sunny day and all of this power is going into the grid, they can't switch off 500 individual systems to prevent a system overload. So it is a legitimate concern, but it's also a concern that we believe can be negotiated and facilitated around.
The city of Calgary is pretty interesting. So city of Calgary owns NMAX. NMAX is a generator and sells electricity to a bunch of people. NMAX also owns all the wires in Calgary that distributes to the houses. If you put solar panels on every house in Calgary, you're not going to be getting any tariffs for the use of those wires that you put in, and you're not going to be able to sell any electricity. So the city of Calgary is in a real dilemma on how they manage solar because it's a revenue stream for the city of Calgary.
Conscious of the time a little bit here, we do have the opportunity, you can have more questions, come on down the front, chat to Jodi, chat to Jeff, put the room for a little bit longer, but I'll just call a close to our evening here, and if everyone can just join with me in thanking Jodi for such a fantastic. Hope to see you next month for our next talks.
Thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, Jeff and I'll just hang around for a bit if you
Everybody's interested in switching to Rocky Mountain Community Energy. There are some little things here that are website on it.